My name is Lena Hartwell, and I am 29 years old. My mother, Marianne Hartwell, told me I was her biggest disappointment, then slid a pen toward me. She wanted me to sign away my inheritance in front of 12 relatives at the dining table. That was 3 years ago, and I can still feel the heat in my cheeks. I walked out of my parents' house that afternoon, with nothing left to claim. No money, no family, no safety net, not even a goodbye. My sister, Sloane Hartwell, accepted everything without hesitation. The $4 million estate, the beach house, and the investment accounts. My father, Grant Hartwell, did not look at me when I left. What none of them understood was what one phone call could uncover later. And when my father finally heard the figure, he repeated 2 words, again and again, like his world had tilted. Now let me take you back to that Sunday in March, the day they erased me. The call came on a Wednesday night, while I sat on the floor of my studio apartment in New Haven. Fabric samples and floor plans covered the rug for my first real solo renovation. It was worth $800, and I was proud of every inch. Then my mother's name lit up my screen, and her message was plain. Family meeting this Sunday. Do not be late. No explanation, no warmth, only instructions. I almost stayed home because her tone felt sharper than usual and strangely rehearsed. But it was family, and despite everything, I still showed up when they called. That has always been my weakness. Sunday morning, I drove 3 hours from New Haven toward Fairfield County. March rain pressed against the windshield, and the wipers kept time like a warning. When I turned onto Ridgewood Lane, their house rose out of the gray sky. Stone walls, dark shutters, and a driveway that seemed made for silence. It was the kind of home that did not welcome you. It measured you. I parked, took a breath, and practiced a smile I did not feel. Inside, the air smelled like lemon polish, and everyone spoke too softly. They guided me to the table and set papers in front of me, as if this was already decided. Everyone is dressed like they are attending something formal today. At the head of the table sits Douglas Pierce, my parents' estate attorney, silver hair, reading glasses hanging from a chain. A thick leather folder lies open, like a verdict already prepared. My father, Grant Hartwell, stands behind his chair, arms crossed, and he does not greet me. My mother, Marianne Hartwell, points to an empty seat at the far end. It is the only seat left, and it feels intentional. And there at my father's right side sits Sloane Hartwell, my older sister. She wears a pressed blazer, pearl earrings, and a calm face. She does not look at me either, but her posture says enough. She already knows what is about to happen, and she is comfortable. On the table in front of my seat, I see a single document. My name is printed at the top, and my stomach tightens. I do not finish the first line before my father clears his throat. "Sit down, Lena," he says. "This will not take long." I sit, and the chair feels colder than it should. My father nods once, and Douglas Pierce begins reading in a flat legal voice. The estate, all of it, is being transferred to Sloane Hartwell. The house on Ridgewood Lane, the beach cottage in Mystic, the investment accounts, the trust fund established by my grandfather, and everything attached to it. Total estimated value is $4 million. Every dollar, every wall. Sloane name appears on every line. Mine appears on none. I look at my father and ask, "And what about me?" He does not answer, and his eyes stay fixed past my shoulder. My mother steps into the silence like she has been waiting for it. "You were always our biggest disappointment," she says, calm and final. "We are not going to pretend anymore," she adds, without a tremor. The room does not move, and nobody interrupts her. Grandma Loretta looks down at her hands and does not look up. Uncle Calvin shifts in his chair, then becomes still again. Aunt Denise studies the table, like the wood has sudden interest. My cousins avoid my eyes, like I have already disappeared. Sloane sits perfectly still, and she does not speak a word. Still, I catch it, the smallest pull at the corner of her mouth. Douglas Pierce clears his throat, then slides the document closer to me. It is a relinquishment of inheritance rights, with tabs already placed. "We will need your signature to finalize," he says, as if it is routine. I look at the pen, then I look at my mother again. Her chin is lifted, and she is daring me to break first. I pick up the pen and my hand stays steady, which surprises even me. I look at my mother, and I speak quietly and clearly. "I heard you, Marianne," I say, and I sign my name. I stand before the ink is even fully dry, and nobody reaches for me. Nobody says wait. Nobody asks if I am okay. The room exhales as I push back from the table. Not relief for me, relief for them. They act like the uncomfortable part has finally passed, and now dinner can continue. I walk down the hallway toward the front door, and my steps echo on hardwood. To my left is the gallery wall, and I have passed it 1,000 times. 3 framed photographs, all of Sloane in perfect light and perfect timing. Sloane at law school graduation, Sloane accepting the Dean's Award, Sloane between our parents on a balcony in Rome. Silver frames, evenly spaced, like a curated museum of approval. There are no photographs of me, not one, not even an old candid shot. I open the front door, and the rain has not stopped outside. My phone buzzes before I reach my car, and I see a message from Sloane. She writes that there are no hard feelings and it is just business. I stare at the screen for 10 seconds, then I delete it. The drive back to New Haven takes 3 hours, and I barely make it 20 minutes. I pull over on the shoulder of Interstate 95, and I turn off the engine. Cars blur past, and rain hammers the roof in a steady rhythm. I do not cry, and I do not scream into my hands. I just sit with the feeling of being removed from your own family, like a line item erased from a spreadsheet, with no second thought. 40 minutes pass, then I start the car again. When I get home, my apartment is exactly as I left it. Fabric samples on the floor, and a client floor plan pinned to the wall. A bowl of cereal still sits on the counter from breakfast. I open my bank account, and the number makes my chest tighten. $3,200, and no safety net behind it. That night I sit on the kitchen floor, and I make a list. Not a list of what I lost, but what I still have left. It is a short list, but it belongs to me. The first client cancels on a Tuesday, and the message is polite and empty. They say they are going in a different direction, and wish me luck. I reply with the same politeness, and I try to move on. These things happen, I tell myself, and I keep working anyway. The second cancellation comes 4 days later, and this one cuts deeper. It was a full kitchen renovation, 3 weeks of planning, measurements already taken. The homeowner calls instead of emailing, and her voice sounds careful. She says they heard I'm going through personal issues, and they want someone stable. I ask who told her that, and she hesitates before answering. She says she would rather not say, and the line goes quiet. Something cold settles in my stomach, and it does not leave quickly. 2 cancellations in 1 week, both using language that sounds coached, both pulling away for reasons that have nothing to do with my work. I start taking smaller jobs just to keep moving forward. A living room refresh for a rental unit, $800. A color consultation for a couple in West Haven, $200. I eat cereal for dinner 3 nights each week, not for nostalgia, for survival. A box costs $3.49, and I count every trip. Rock bottom is not dramatic, it is quiet and repetitive. It is splitting a box of pasta into 3 meals and calling it budgeting. In the third week, I call the only family lifeline I think I still have. Uncle Calvin, my father's younger brother, always gentler than Grant. He once told me my eye for color reminded him of Grandma Loretta. "Lena, I love you," he says, "but do not pull me into the middle." Then he hangs up, and I understand there is no middle at all. There is the Hartwell family, and there is me, like separate countries now. That evening, an email arrives from an address I do not recognize. Someone requests a design consultation for a penthouse in Hartford with a significant budget. I almost delete it, because it feels too good to trust. I do not delete it, and I answer the next morning. The truth finds me later, in a coffee shop on Chapel Street. It is a Saturday morning, about 6 weeks after the meeting. I am reviewing sketches for a bathroom remodel, the only project left. A woman approaches my table and I recognize her at once. Kelsey Rowan, a former client, and her face carries unease. She sits down without asking and asks if I am still working. I say of course, and I ask why she would question that. She stirs her coffee slowly, then tells me Sloan said I was not. She says my sister mentioned it at a dinner party and made it sound serious. She said I had stepped back, and I was having a rough time. Kelsey pauses, then adds one more detail, and it lands like a slap. Sloan also hinted I was cut off for reasons she could not explain. She made it sound legal, and a couple of people there were in real. 3 months after that dinner table, I break my own rule, and I call Marianne Hartwell. I do not call to beg, and I do not call to cry. I call because I need one clean answer before I walk away forever. She picks up on the third ring, and she says my name like a label, not a greeting. I ask if the meeting was planned, the relatives, the papers, Douglas Pierce, all of it. She goes quiet, and in that quiet I can hear her breathing, slow and measured. I can also hear a kitchen faucet dripping somewhere, steady like a clock. She finally says they did what was best for the family. I ask if it was best for the family or best for Sloan Hartwell. Marianne says Sloan never gave them a reason to worry. I tell her I never did either. And the silence stretches longer this time. Then her voice softens, but it is the softness of someone explaining rules to a child. She says if I had listened from the beginning, if I had gone to law school, or at least gotten a real job, none of this would have happened. She says I chose this, and there it is, the core of everything. In Marianne's world, obedience equals love, and I do not qualify. I tell her this is the last time I will call this number. She says I am being dramatic, and I tell her I am being clear. I end the call, and I keep my word. No calls, no texts, no emails, not that month, not the month after. The silence between us becomes a wall, and each day I do not reach out. It rises another inch. The rage drains out faster than I expected, and what remains is quiet. A terrible, steady quiet that sounds a lot like freedom. 4 months after the family meeting, Sloan Hartwell sends her first email. The subject line is gentle, and the message is long, careful, and soaked in concern. She says she had no part in their decision. She says Grant Hartwell and Marianne acted on their own. She says she tried to talk them out of it, but I know how her father is. She says she hopes I am doing okay, and she worries about me. I read it twice, not because it is convincing, but because it is crafted. Every sentence feels like legal protection. No admissions, no specifics, no responsibility. The email is not for me, it is insurance. If the story ever explodes, she can point to it and say she reached out. I do not respond. 2 weeks later, a second email arrives, shorter and sharper. She says she heard I am struggling financially, and if I need help, she is here. She says I do not have to do this alone. And then she writes 2 words, "Just ask." Those words land heavy because they come from someone standing on my neck. I close my laptop, then I stop because a small instinct wakes up. I open it again, and I create a new folder in my inbox. I name it simply S. I move both emails into it, and I do not even know why yet. I just know I need a record. Sloane is meticulous and she plans ahead. If she is building a narrative, then I should keep my own. Her kindness has always come with a receipt, and I finally decide to read the fine print. The Hartford penthouse message is the first good news in weeks, and I almost delete it. It looks too clean, too generous, like a trap disguised as opportunity. But I answer, and the next day I meet the sender in person. Her name is June Whitaker, and she is 62 years old, self-made, sharp-eyed, and unafraid of silence. She owns commercial properties across Connecticut and North Carolina, and her handshake tells me she has spent a lifetime proving people wrong. We meet at the penthouse on the 18th floor, overlooking Bushnell Park. The space is a disaster, with stripped walls, exposed pipes, and a kitchen left unfinished. Most designers would see a problem, but I see potential. June watches me walk the rooms for 40 minutes, and I do not pitch myself once. I touch surfaces, measure light with my hand, and crouch to check sight lines. When I finish, she stands in the doorway with her arms crossed, and she gives the faintest smile. She tells me I see space differently than anyone she has met. The project runs for 5 months, with a budget of $120,000. I barely sleep, and every choice is deliberate. When it is done, June walks through the finished rooms and says nothing for a long moment. Then she tells me she has 3 colleagues who need someone exactly like me. Within 2 months, I have 4 active projects, real ones, not survival jobs. Over dinner one evening, June mentions she is exploring boutique hospitality, and she might want to talk about working together. She tells me she does not invest in people who need saving. She invests in people who just need a door. 8 months after the family meeting, that door opens in Asheville, North Carolina, and I decide to walk through it. I leave Connecticut at the end of summer, and I pack light on purpose. I sell most of my furniture, and I keep only what matters. 2 suitcases of clothes, 1 box of sketchbooks, and a laptop. June Whitaker sends me an address in Asheville and a key code. She tells me the apartment is temporary, and the work is real. I drive south for 10 hours, with rain chasing my taillights. When I arrive, the air feels warmer and softer on my skin. The mountains sit in the distance, and they look like a promise. The next morning, I walk into a half-renovated storefront, and I meet June there. She points to an empty room and says this can be Brightstone Studio. My throat tightens at the name because it sounds solid and new. She does not offer comfort, she offers a plan. She gives me 3 projects and a deadline for each. A boutique lobby refresh, a townhouse staging, and a restaurant redesign. I work like my life depends on it, because it does. At night, I fall asleep with fabric swatches on my chest and wake up still thinking. In the first month, I eat takeout on the floor and call it dinner. In the second month, I buy a small table and feel like I earned it. June checks my progress without hovering, and she corrects me when needed. She tells me good work speaks and weak work begs. By the 3rd month, referrals start coming from people I have never met. A hotel manager, a real estate investor, a couple opening a salon. They say June Whitaker sent them, and that is enough. Back in Connecticut, I was walking through smoke, always coughing. Here, the air is clear, and my name is not poisoned yet. I still think about Sloane Hartwell sometimes, late at night. I remember the way she smiled at that table, and I feel the old anger rise. Then I look around my small studio space, and I breathe again. I am not building revenge. I am building distance. And for the first time in years, distance feels like safety. By spring, Brightstone Studio is no longer an idea. It is a schedule. My calendar fills with site visits, and vendor calls, and approvals. I hire one assistant, then another, because I cannot do everything alone. I learn the local network fast, and I show up early to every meeting. When a contractor misses a detail, I catch it before it becomes a disaster. When a client hesitates, I explain choices in plain language. People trust clarity, and I finally speak with it. June Whittaker stays in the background, but her influence is everywhere. Her name opens doors, and my work keeps them open. One afternoon, she invites me to lunch and slides a folder across the table. Inside is a proposal for a new venture, Brightstone Collective, a small group of designers and builders. The goal is simple: renovate properties, then sell them at a profit. June says she will fund the first purchase, and she wants me as a partner. I do not say yes right away, because fear still lives in my ribs. I ask questions, I check numbers, and I read every line twice. She watches me and nods like she approves of caution. 2 weeks later, I sign on, and we buy a tired bungalow near downtown Asheville. We gut the kitchen, open the living space, and bring light into every corner. When the listing goes live, buyers line up within days. The house sells and the profit is real, and my hands shake again. Not from humiliation this time, from disbelief. That night I sit in my office alone, and I pull up the folder labeled S. I reread Sloan emails, and I notice what I ignored before. The timing, the wording, the careful distance from responsibility. The messages feel less like sisterly concern and more like control. I save copies to a drive, and I lock them away. I do not know what they will matter for yet. I do not know what they will matter. I only know that people who plan leave trails on purpose. It happens in a place I did not expect, a design conference in Charlotte. I go to speak on a panel, and I wear a simple black dress. I do not dress to impress. I dress to focus. In the lobby, I hear my last name spoken by strangers, and my shoulders stiffen. 2 women near the coffee station are whispering, and one says Hartwell. The other says she heard the story, the one about the sister cut off. I walk past them, and I keep my face calm. Later that night, I check my inbox and I see a new message. It is from Noah Bradford, a real estate attorney based in Connecticut. He says he found my name through June Whittaker, and he wants to discuss something sensitive. He does not explain more in the email, which makes me uneasy. I schedule a call for the next morning, and I barely sleep. On the call, Noah speaks carefully, like he is choosing every word. He says Douglas Pierce contacted him, seeking an independent review. Douglas claims there may have been misconduct surrounding the Hartwell estate decision. Noah says he has not formed an opinion yet, but he has seen odd patterns. He asks if I have kept any communication from my sister, and I tell him yes. I do not mention the folder name, and I do not add drama. I only say I have her emails, and the dates are clear. Noah pauses, then says he will want copies, with full headers intact. My mouth goes dry, because the past is suddenly walking toward me. After the call, I sit still for a long time, listening to the air conditioner hum. I thought I left that family in Connecticut, like an old coat. But the truth has a way of following, and now it is knocking. Noah Bradford calls again 2 days later, and his tone has changed. He sounds less cautious now and more certain. He says Douglas Pierce has been reviewing the Hartwell file, and something does not add up. He says the reasons your parents claimed do not match the paperwork trail. He says there are references to client complaints and professional warnings, but the sources are thin. He also says there are digital records that appear to be sent in your name. When he says that, my spine tightens, and I feel my hands go cold. I tell Noah Bradford that I never sent anything like that, and I have proof of where I was. He asks for timelines, and I give them slow and exact. He asks for my email history, and I tell him I can provide it. He pauses, then says one more detail, and it lands hard. Douglas Pierce suspects the messages were not just rumors. They were forged communications. He says there are patterns that point to someone familiar with your voice. Someone who knew your clients and knew what words would cut. I think of Sloane Hartwell at that table, silent and composed. I think of her polished emails and her careful distance. Noah says he will send instructions for preserving headers and metadata. He says, do not forward anything casually, and do not edit the files. After the call, I open my folder, and I stare at the messages again. For the first time, I do not read them as a sister. I read them like evidence. Noah Bradford receives my files, and he confirms what I feared. He says the forged emails are not random. They are targeted. They are sent to contractors, realtors, and past clients in Connecticut. They describe me as unstable, unreliable, and desperate for money. They mention private details, just enough to sound real. They also include small mistakes, the kind a stranger would not make. Noah says the timing matches my first months after the family meeting. That is when cancellations started, and doors closed without explanation. That is when I was eating cereal for dinner and counting every dollar. I sit in my office in Asheville, and the room feels smaller. I remember Kelsey Rowan in that coffee shop, and her uneasy face. I remember her saying Sloane had hinted that I was cut off for serious reasons. Now those words have a shape, and it is uglier than gossip. Noah says Douglas Pierce is preparing to confront Grant Hartwell with a documented trail. He says your father may finally understand what happened behind his back. I do not celebrate that, I just feel tired. Noah asks if I want to pursue a lawsuit, and I tell him not yet. I want the truth exposed, but I do not want my life consumed. He says there are other options, including a formal cease and desist. He says it can force the behavior to stop without turning into a public war. I tell him to proceed, and my voice does not shake this time. The cease and desist goes out within a week, and it is addressed directly to Sloane Hartwell. It is firm, and it is specific, and it lists dates and recipients. It demands she stop contacting my clients and stop impersonating my identity. It warns that further misconduct will trigger litigation and formal complaints. Noah Bradford tells me the letter is designed to be unmistakable. It is not a threat built on emotion. It is a warning built on facts. 2 days later, I receive an email from Sloane. The subject line is my first name and nothing else. She writes that this is all a misunderstanding, and she never intended harm. She writes that people misinterpret things, and that I am overreacting. She writes that family should not involve lawyers, and she hopes I will calm down. I read it once, then I save it, and I do not respond. The next week, another message arrives, and this one is sharper. She says I am trying to ruin her, and she says I am jealous. She says Brightstone Studio must be a fraud, and she wonders who I am really working for. I feel a flash of anger, then it fades quickly. I forward the message to Noah Bradford, and I return to my work. A month passes, and the cancellations stop. You hear? The whispers quiet down, at least in the channels she used before. I do not feel victorious. I feel lighter. For years, she controlled the story, and I swallowed the consequences. Now the story has limits, and she does not like that. The best part is simple. I do not have to convince her of anything. I only have to keep building, and keep breathing, and keep my distance. Douglas Pierce meets with Grant Hartwell the next week, and the meeting is not gentle. Douglas brings printed timelines and screenshots, and a clean explanation. He shows how the forged emails moved through contacts, and how the wording repeats in patterns. He shows how the messages were timed to hit my work at its weakest point. Douglas says the evidence is consistent with impersonation, and the access suggests someone close. Grant Hartwell does not like hearing that, because it means he might have punished the wrong person. According to Douglas Pierce, my father keeps asking one question, again and again: how could this happen under my roof? Douglas does not answer with comfort, he answers with facts. He says the family meeting was used as cover, and the narrative was shaped before I arrived. He says the estate transfer may be legal on paper, but the motives matter. When Douglas finally says Sloan Hartwell, name out loud, my father reportedly goes silent. That silence is familiar to me, because it is the same silence he gave me. Only now it is aimed at his favorite child. 2 days later, I receive an email from Grant Hartwell. It is short, and it does not apologize. It says we need to talk, and it asks for a call. I stare at it for a long time. Then I forward it to Noah Bradford. Noah tells me to stay calm and to keep everything documented. He tells me my father reaching out is not resolution. It is pressure testing. That night, I sit in my office at Brightstone Studio, lights low, and I feel something strange. It is not hope, and it is not fear. It is the recognition that the story is turning, and the people who wrote it are losing control. I agree to a call, but not alone, and not unprotected. Noah Bradford joins the line, and he does most of the listening. Grant Hartwell sounds older than I remember, less certain, more tired. He starts by saying he did not know, and I almost laugh. Not because it is funny, but because it is typical. He did not know, because he did not want to know. He says Douglas Pierce brought him proof, and it points towards Sloan Hartwell. He says he confronted her, and she denied everything at first. Then she blamed stress, and misunderstandings, and other people. Grant says he wants me to come home, so we can sort it out as a family. Noah asks him what sorting it out means, and my father hesitates. He says he wants to make things right, and he wants peace. Noah asks if Grant Hartwell is prepared to correct the legal outcome, and my father goes quiet again. Then he says he needs time, because reversing the estate would create conflict. That answer tells me everything. He wants relief from guilt, not accountability. I tell him I am not coming to Connecticut, and I am not sitting at that table again. I tell him I built a life in Asheville, and I am not trading it for their chaos. Grant says Marianne Hartwell is devastated, and I feel my chest tighten for 1 second. Then I remember her voice, and the pen sliding toward me. I tell him Marianne made her choice, and so did he. I end the call politely, and I do not cry after. Noah Bradford tells me that was the correct decision, and he says the next steps will reveal their true intent. He is right, because within hours I receive a message from Aunt Denise. She writes that family is family, and I should not punish everyone. She writes that Sloan made mistakes, and I should be the bigger person. I read it, save it, and I return to my work. I do not owe them the version of me that always absorbs the damage. The invitation arrives from June Whitaker, and it is not about my family. It is a fundraising gala in Hartford, tied to a historic restoration project. June says the room will be full of investors, and the exposure is valuable. She also says my presence matters, because Brightstone Collective is stepping into larger deals. I travel north for 2 days, and I tell myself this is business, not nostalgia. The venue is bright, The kind of ballroom that makes everyone look polished. When I step inside, I keep my posture steady and I scan the room like I was taught. That is when I see them, Grant Hartwell and Marianne Hartwell, standing near a sponsor wall. Sloane Hartwell is beside them, in a fitted dress, smiling at someone important. For a moment, all the old memories press against my ribs. Then June Whitaker touches my elbow and guides me forward. She introduces me to a circle of donors, and she says this is Lena Hartwell, founder of Brightstone Studio and partner in Brightstone Collective. People shake my hand and they ask about my projects. They do not ask about my parents, and they do not ask about the past. Across the room, my mother notices me, and her face changes fast. My father follows her gaze, and he looks like he has been hit. Sloane turns last, and her smile holds for 1 second, then cracks. I do not walk over, and I do not confront anyone. I simply continue the conversation in front of me, and I let my calm do the speaking. Later, when I pass the bar, Marianne steps into my path. She says, "Lena, please," and her voice sounds rehearsed. I tell her I am here for work, and I keep moving. The most powerful moment is not anger, it is indifference. For years they acted like I was nothing without them. Now they have to watch me exist fully, without permission. After the gala, the story moves faster than I expect. People in Hartford talk, and they always talk in the same places, over drinks, in boardrooms, on private calls. Sloane Hartwell tries to recover control, but control is harder when evidence exists. Noah Bradford tells me the cease and desist has ripple effects. Some of the recipients of the forged messages have begun comparing notes. A contractor forwards a screenshot to another contractor. A realtor asks a colleague, and suddenly the pattern is visible. Once people see a pattern, they start asking why. Sloane still goes to work each day, still wears the same polished smile, but her confidence has hairline cracks. A week after the gala, I hear from Kelsey Rowan again. She says she attended a small dinner where Sloane's name came up. Someone mentioned impersonation, and someone else mentioned a letter from Noah. Kelsey says Sloane laughed too loudly and changed the subject too fast. That kind of laugh is a tell. It is a mask slipping. The next day, a message arrives from Sloane to my work email. She says we should meet privately and resolve this like sisters. She says lawyers are making everything worse, and she says she will explain. I do not answer. I forward it to Noah, and I return to my meetings. That is my boundary now, and it is firm. 2 weeks later, Noah calls with an update. He says Douglas Pierce has informed the Hartford Bar Association, and that a complaint process may begin. Not against me, but against Sloane, if she used legal access to harm someone. Noah says this is not certain, but it is possible. I picture Sloane at that dining table, calm as stone, and I imagine her facing real consequences. It does not make me happy. It makes me quiet. Consequences are not revenge. They are balance. Grant Hartwell sends another email, longer than the first. He says he is sorry for how things happened, and he admits he trusted the wrong person. He says Marianne Hartwell has been crying, and Grandma Loretta keeps asking about me. He says the family feels broken, and he wants to repair it. He says he is willing to help financially, and he asks what I need. I read the email once, then I read it again because the wording matters. He still does not say, I wronged you. He still does not say, I chose Sloane over you. He says things happened, like weather, like accidents, like nobody drove the knife. Noah Bradford tells me this is a common pattern. People offer money because money is easier than accountability. I reply with one sentence and I keep it respectful. I say I do not need financial help, and I am not discussing reconciliation right now. Then I stop. Within an hour, Aunt Denise texts me and says I am being cold. She says Grant is trying and I should meet them halfway. I do not respond, because halfway is where I used to get hurt. That night, I look around my office at Brightstone Studio, and I think about the woman I was in New Haven. The woman eating cereal, counting dollars, and blaming herself. I wish I could reach back through time and tell her this. One day, they will ask to come back into your life. When they do, you are allowed to say no. In the months that follow, Brightstone Studio grows steadily. Brightstone Collective completes 2 more renovations, and we begin scouting larger properties. June Whitaker tells me she is proud, but she does not say it often. When she does, it feels earned. The Hartwell family fades into the background. Like a radio I finally turned off. I still receive occasional messages, polite apologies, invitations, and updates I did not request. I save them, and I leave them unanswered. The best revenge is not a dramatic courtroom, and it is not a public collapse. The best revenge is waking up in a life you built, and realizing their approval is no longer a currency you need. When I think about Sloane Hartwell now, I do not feel rage. I feel a clear understanding. She did what she did because she believed she could. She believed our parents would always protect her, and that I would always swallow the pain. She was wrong about the second part, and eventually she may be wrong about the first. I do not know what her final consequences will be, and I do not chase them. I focus on what I can control. My work, my boundaries, my peace. The truth is simple, and it is the lesson I carry. Sometimes the door that closes is the door that saves you, and sometimes the door that opens is not luck. It is proof that you kept walking, even when you were alone.